Okay, so if you have I to a number, it can only give you one of four answers, okay? And those answers are 1, -1, I, and -I. So when I do these problems, I think of prom dates. Not sure why, but I do. And assuming that we have the right pairings, if I have 32 kids, how many pairs can I make?
16, yeah.
So I have I squared to the 16, right? What if I have 33 people? How many pairs can I make?
If you have 33.
If I have 33, huh?
No.
16.
It's I squared to the 16, and there's a lonely guy here without a prom date, right?
Oh, yeah.
Got it? And what about 34?
17.
I squared to the 17. And what about 35?
I squared 17 plus 1.
And a lonely guy, right? Okay, so let's see what this all means. Does anybody remember what I squared is equal to?
1, 2.
-1.
Oh.
Yes. So if it's -1 to the 16, -1 to the 16 with an I next to it, -1 to the 17, and -1 to the 17 with an I next to it. Everybody follow what I'm doing?
Yeah, hold on. This guy's right.
So if you're doing -1 to an even number, you get 1. If you get -1 to an even number, it's 1 times I, you get I. What's -1 to an odd number? -1 to an odd number? -1. And -1 to an odd number with an I gunked on it is -I. You see how you got one of each of those when you have 4 in a row? When you have a negative exponent, what do you do to make it positive? What do you do to make a negative exponent positive? If it's upstairs, you put it downstairs. If it's downstairs, you put it upstairs. So this is the same as 1 over I to the 15. So let's deal with I to the 15 separately here. We got that 1 upstairs. We'll just deal with that in a minute. And I to the 15 is, how many prom dates can I get out of 15 people? How many pairs? 7. So I squared, you have 7 pairs and a little I left over, right? So I squared is -1, so that's 1 to the -1 to the 7 with an I left over. So that's 1 over -I, or -1 over I. So we have a problem. We cannot have an I in the basement. Okay? What can I multiply that I by to get rid of it?
By an I.
By an I. Very good. But whatever I do upstairs, I got to do downstairs. So that's going to be -I over I squared. What is I squared equal to?
Wait, did that go on the board?
So I squared is -1, and -I divided by -1 is +I. So that's your final answer. Okay, the top one is very, very simple. You add the real part of the number, and the real part is the part that doesn't have i's. So -3 plus 4 is 1. And then you write you add the imaginary part. 2i minus 3i is -I. And you're done.
That was really good.
Wait, do what now?
You just add the imaginary and the real parts, like you would add 3 plus 2x and 4 plus 3x. The bottom is a little bit harder, but it's still easy. This minus sign belongs to everybody inside that second parenthesis. So before we combine anything, change the sign of what's inside the second parenthesis, and then combine. What's 4 plus 3?
7.
And -3i plus 4i?
I.
And that's the answer to that. So here we're going to FOIL. And if you like the box method, you can use the box method here. And you would just make a little box. It's a 2 by 2 and a 2 by 2. Do you know how to do this? And you put a 6 and a 3i. And 6 times 3 is 18. 6 times -2i is -12i. 3 times 3i is 9i. And negative 2i times 3i is negative 6i squared. But then you remember that I told you that I squared equals negative 1. So this turns into a positive 6. That just changes the sign of the number. So now you add the numbers, which is 18 and 6 is 24. And then you add the imaginary,
It's not loading.
which is negative 3i. So on this top one, we multiply by the conjugate, which is 4 minus I. Whatever we do downstairs, we have to do upstairs. And then upstairs, it ends up being
We just did that one.
Yeah, we just
She's
did that.
doing it for
12 minus 3i minus 8i plus 2i squared. The 2i squared turns into a negative 2. And downstairs, we get a 17 when we FOIL it. And you can see that that's 16. And then this is minus I squared, which turns into a plus 1. And the 2 in the middle bite the dust because it's difference of 2 squares. So we end up with 10 minus 11i over 17. And it cannot be reduced, so we leave it alone. Now on the second one, we have to get rid of the I in the basement. What do you think we multiply by?
Positive 3i.
You could do that, but you're going to make it more complicated. You just need an I to get rid of the I. You just need a plain I to get rid of the I. So I'm going to multiply this by I, and I'm going to put parentheses around this guy and this guy. And this is going to be 2i minus 4i squared over negative 3i squared. So upstairs we get 4 plus 2i. Does everybody see where I got the 4? Because that's negative 4 times negative 1. And then downstairs, I have negative 3 times negative 1, so that's a 3. So that would be your final answer. You got your I out of the basement, you divided it.